Okay, good evening. My name is David Cashman from SEB Housing. This is the information session for the affordable rental units at Bridgewater Viva. It's just coming up on 6 p.m. On Monday the 21st. We're going to wait just a little bit longer to see if some more folks join us. So we'll get started in just a moment here, and we'll go through some of the big points about what this opportunity is, how to apply, and what to expect going forward. But again, just going to wait for a minute here before we get started to see if there are other households who want to join. Okay, I show 6:03, so we're going to get started. And if there are other households that join in a little bit, that'll be great. Again, this is the information session for the affordable units at Viva in Bridgewater. This is a great opportunity where units in this brand new development will be made available at affordable prices to households that qualify. This development has a lot of great features. The units are of ample size. They have plank-style flooring, stainless steel appliances, and granite countertops. And each unit also has washers and dryers. There's also a number of different amenities within the building and area. There's a wellness center, a designer saltwater pool, an outdoor kitchen, and areas for people to socialize and spend time together. Recreational areas also around the building, a dog park, and many other features. So there's a brand new development. Units are expected to start coming online in the spring. Hopefully that holds up. And in total at this development, there will be 300 units. 75 of those units are being made available through this opportunity. What is this opportunity? So it is affordable housing. And what that means is that the units are being made available at a rental price that's less than what they would be on the market. Now, if people have a voucher, a mobile voucher, they can use it. But in this program, it is not a subsidy program. So in general, households are expected to be able to support the rent on the strength of their own income and assets, which we'll talk about later. And if households do meet certain income and asset requirements, among others, they can be eligible for this opportunity. Now, the rents specifically for the affordable units, actually, we'll just talk quickly about what the breakdown of the affordable units is. So they come in a variety of different sizes, representing the different bedroom sizes in the community as a whole. So this community is going to have studio apartments. They'll have 1-bedroom apartments, 2-bedroom apartments, and 3-bedroom apartments. The affordable units will also be offered in an allocation of studios, 1s, 2s, and 3 bedrooms. Specifically, there's going to be 8 studio apartments. Those have 1 bathroom and go about 650 square feet, roughly. 26 1-bedroom apartments with 1 bath, and those are about 860 square feet. 34 2-bedroom units, those have 2 baths and are over 1,200 square feet. And 7 3-bedrooms, those also have 2 baths, and those are over 1,600 square feet. Now, of those units, a number of units are also designated as having features for people with mobility impairments, and also there are units for people who have hearing impairments. Typically disabled, so those features are often, things like grab bars or lower countertops, or, having accessibility via an elevator or the first floor, or if it's hearing impaired, there may be visual cues where otherwise they might be something that makes a sound. And so if you qualify for one of those because you have a mobility impairment or a hearing impairment, you would get priority for one of those units. And there's a question in the application. So just make sure to answer that yes, if that does apply to you. Rents. So for the studio units, the rents are $1,258 per month. For the 1-bedrooms, they are $1,331 per month. For the 2-bedroom units, they are $1,595 per month. And for the 3-bedroom units, they are $1,834 per month. Now, those rents are based on numbers that are published by the federal government, by HUD each year, usually in the spring in April. And the rents are derived from a formula where a household making 80% of the area median income shouldn't be spending more than 30% of their income on rent. You don't need to know that formula. The kind of relevance is that rents are not tied to any specific applicant's particular financial circumstances. So, if you whatever your financial picture is, rents aren't calculated on account of your financial picture. They're calculated on account of what the HUD numbers say. The HUD numbers change each year, and in consequence, rents will change most likely each year. I should also say that the rents that I just listed do not include certain utilities, and tenants will have to pay some of their own utilities. Those are heat, water heating, cooking, and electricity. So the overall rent will be slightly higher than the numbers that I previously mentioned. And obviously how much higher will be a function of how much of those utilities you use and what your bill is each month. But water and sewer are included in the rent. So there's that. And also there's a free parking space included in the rent. So that is a breakdown of the affordable units. There is a table in the information packet, so you don't have to memorize what I just said. And the information packet is available on our website, www.sebhousing.com. So if you didn't write that down and want to just refresh your memory on what the availability of units is, you'll find it on page 2 of the information packet. It's also, or page 3 rather. It's also in the ad and on the listing on our website. So it's all right there. It's also important to note that these units have all been approved by Mass Housing Partnership, which is the administering agency overseeing this development. And so what that means is that the affordable units are kind of fairly distributed throughout the site. They're not all in one corner of the buildings. They're not all stacked one on top of another. They're not distinguishable as affordable units to someone walking through the building. So they are a fair representation of the unit as a whole, scattered throughout various parts of the site, and not observable as affordable units from the outside. I guess point is, if you do end up moving forward in this opportunity, you would not have to be concerned that if you got the opportunity to move in, that somehow your unit would be, someone walking by would know that it was not one of the market rate units in the building. How long do the affordable apartments remain that way? Well, each year there are income limits that HUD publishes, and households have to stay under those income limits, and we'll talk about those in a sec. On renewal each year, so if you're able to move forward in this opportunity and you get a unit, each year you have to recertify and show that you're still eligible for the program. The nice thing is that the program builds in a nice buffer so that if your income goes up in the ensuing year that you're living in your apartment, you're not going to become disqualified right away just because your income went up a little bit. In fact, it can go up by 140%, and you'd still be eligible. And only if you went above 140% of the income limit that applied when you were moving in would you become ineligible for the affordable rents. And at that point, you could stay in your apartment, but you would just be paying market rents. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll talk specifically about what those numbers are a little bit later on. But the nice thing is, if you do get an affordable apartment, yes, you have to recertify each year and show that you're still eligible. However, there's a cushion built in so that if you make a little bit more income, you could still be eligible for this program. And actually, it's a pretty decent cushion. I think the numbers work out to be about $25,000 or $28,000 more that you can make. So you're getting brand new apartments that aren't, if you move forward, this is an opportunity for brand new construction, brand new apartments, great features in the apartments and in the buildings. So how do you become eligible? Who can qualify for this? Well, the biggest thing is you have to have income and assets that qualify. Obviously, if you're going to get it doesn't come as any surprise that if you're going to get an affordable apartment, probably doesn't come as a surprise you have to make under a certain amount of income. And we'll talk in a moment about specifically what that is. There is also a prohibition on families where every occupant is a full-time student. This program doesn't allow that. There are some exceptions to that. And in the information packet and the application, you can read about what those exceptions are. And there are 5 of them. In addition, larger units, so the 2 bedrooms and the 3 bedrooms, there will be priority for households that are bigger and who need all of the bedrooms in the unit. And there's a question on the application. So one of the first, on one of the first pages of the application, it will ask you, page 4, what household type you are. And essentially, you can only be one household type. You could be a type 1, a type 2, or a type 3. And those types correspond to the number of bedrooms that the program says you need. So a type 3 household is a household that the program says needs 3 bedrooms. A type 2 household is a household that the program would say needs 2 bedrooms, and a type 1 needs 1 bedroom. So there are, a number of examples of each type. There are 5 different type 3 households. You could be, a parent with 2 kids. Program would say the parent gets 1 bedroom and each kid gets a different bedroom. They need 3 bedrooms. They're a type 3. If you have 6 people in your household, whatever the makeup of that household is, you're also going to need 3 bedrooms. And there are other examples too. They're listed right in the application where you have to designate your household type. See, it's pretty straightforward. You just, go take a look, see which one applies to you, check off the appropriate box. The relevance of that is that for the 2 and 3 bedroom units, household types 2 and 3 will get priority over household type 1, because the program wants to make sure that households who need the bigger units get the bigger units before they're made available to households who might like the bigger units but who don't need the bigger units. And later on, when we talk about the lottery and the waiting lists, we can talk a little bit about how the sorting of the lottery is done to effectuate those priorities for larger household size that I just talked about. Finally, households can't have a financial interest in the development. This is not something that comes up very often, but if you work for the developer or related some way, or the management team, you would be disqualified from this opportunity, so as to avoid the possibility, the possible appearance of impropriety. Income limits. This is the biggest thing, okay, for qualifying for this opportunity. So you want to get an affordable apartment, that's great. The rents are considerably less than what they would be on the market, even though it's, the units are quite similar. They're all brand new. They're all in the same building. So if you want to be eligible, you have to be under certain income limits. Those income limits are based on the number of people that you're going to be living with, who are going to be applying with you and living in the unit. Make sure when you fill out the application, list exactly who's going to live there. This is, you can change it later on, but it's not as easy as just saying, hey, I was planning on living there, just me, and now I'm going to add someone else, because everyone who's living in the unit needs to be certified as eligible for the program, and for good reason. Maybe I make $50,000 and I'm under the income limit for a household size of 1, but if I'm just adding someone later on and they make $150,000, well, that puts us well over any income limits. So think of, when you're filling out your application, take a moment to think, about who's likely to be living in the unit. List those people. Those are the people whose income and asset documentation, we're going to need to see, and who will be evaluating to see if you're eligible for the program. All the income limits are listed in the materials. They're in, the ad, they're in the info pack, they're in the application, so you don't need to memorize it. But a household size of 1, just to give you kind of an example, can make up to $53,350. And a household size of 6 can make up to $88,350. So about a $30,000+ spread. And then obviously household size 2 through 5, there are various income limits in between those, the 53,000 and 88,000 that I just mentioned. Income is counted broadly. It's your gross income, first of all. It's not your net. And this program requires that we count income expansively. So, the kind of obvious thing that pops in most people's minds when you think about income is, what do I make in my job? That's my income. And that's true. That is your income. But there are also other sources of income that people have that they don't necessarily, aren't the first things that pop in their mind when they think about income, but that still counts. So if you have a 9-to-5 job, you're a W-2 employee, you get a salary, but you also do some side work. You're self-employed, you have your own little business, you sell stuff online. Well, that self-employment income counts as well. Or if you are divorced and you get child support or alimony from your ex-spouse, that's income. If you are getting Social Security or SSDI, that's income. If you have a pension, that's income. If you're getting unemployment, that's income. Workman's compensation, it's all income. One of the things that happens sometimes is people get periodic payments. Maybe you have a friend or family member who's helping out a little bit, gives you some money, once every 2 weeks or once a month to help with necessities. That's great, depending on the frequency that you get the money and how long it's been going on. That can also count as income. So in the application, we list a lot of different income sources. Interest income is another type. So we list a lot of the different income sources. that's a great place to look through. You're going to have to look through it because you have to fill the chart out. And if you have any of those other ones, make sure to list those. It doesn't do you any good to kind of undercount in the section on income in the application, because later on, if we see that you have another job that you didn't disclose, well, we're obviously going to have to count that. And maybe we thought you were eligible for the lottery because you only disclosed the money you make from your W-2 job, but you didn't disclose that you have a side job, self-employed selling stuff on the internet, and you make some income there, and that puts you over the limit. And that stuff usually shows up in your bank accounts and your taxes and stuff like that. So you're better off just list it all out when you apply, and that way we can give you the most accurate assessment of whether you ultimately will be eligible for this opportunity or not. Really, pretty much all sources of income are counted, with the exception of dependents under the age of 18. And full-time students, if they have income, we only are able to count up to $480 of that. Anything above that doesn't get counted. But beyond those two exceptions, everything counts. We do also have to look at assets. However, there's really no asset limit for homeownership affordable developments. There is an asset limit of $75,000, but for rental developments, which this is, there is no asset limit. So there's really, you really should just disclose all of that without fear that it could put you over some limit, because again, we're not assessing it as against an asset limit. Now, that being said, if you have assets that generate income, and sometimes people do, that income does get counted towards the income limits that we just talked about a moment ago. So that's really kind of the most relevant way that your assets come up. And assets also are expansive, just the same way income sources are. So some of the kind of more obvious ones are if you have a checking account or a savings account at a bank, those are assets, but also Cash App, like PayPal and Venmo, those are really popular now. So, if you've got $1,000 in a PayPal account that you haven't released yet, because it kind of sits in there until you accept it and it goes into your bank account, or you just PayPal someone else and it subtracts against the total that's sitting in there. But the money that's in there, that's an asset. Or if you have retirement accounts or stocks or bonds, those are assets. Real estate, that's another kind of big one. For real estate, you can't own a property and move into a rental unit. So if you do own property, you would need to sell it before you move in. It's okay if you still own it at the time you apply for this opportunity, at the time you apply for the lottery. However, we would note that in our letter to you, saying, that you're conditionally eligible for the lottery and you're going to move forward. But we do note that you own this property. You can't own property and move forward in signing a lease for a rental unit at Viva. So before you do sign a lease, you're going to have to sell the property, and you're going to have to produce documentation demonstrating that you have sold it. And that documentation is usually a closing disclosure form that shows, what the price is going to be, and a number of the other figures related to the closing. When you're applying for the lottery, we've discussed the income limits, and you have to be under those income limits to be eligible for the program. But in addition, and as I mentioned at the beginning, this is an opportunity where it's expected that applicants will have enough income and assets to be able to afford the rent on the strength of their own income and assets, because you have to pay the rent on your own. So when you apply for the lottery, we will be taking a look to make sure that you have enough to support the rent, because really it doesn't do you as an applicant any good for us to pass you along if, say you make $7,000 a year and you don't have a voucher or something. you'd be eligible for the program because if you make $7,000 a year, you're well under the income limits, but you wouldn't make enough to be able to afford the rent if you didn't also have a voucher. So it wouldn't do any good for us to say, yeah, you're eligible for the program. We're going to pass you on to the next stage in this process, because ultimately the leasing office is going to say, we're very sorry, but you don't make enough money to afford the rent. So there is kind of a minimum income plus assets test, and this is a much looser, I'm sort of loath to even use the word test, a much looser screening that we do than the screening we do for the maximum income limits, because that's a program requirement that you have to make less than a certain amount. But the kind of minimum income and assets is a screening we do to make sure you make enough. And again, it's much looser, but what those figures are about a little under $38,000 for a studio, a little under $40,000 for a one-bedroom, almost $48,000 for a two-bedroom, and just about $55,000 for a three-bedroom. So again, that's the amount you need to make an income in combination with your assets to demonstrate that when the time comes, you would have enough to be able to afford the rent and meet the leasing office's criteria. And I believe that's 2.5 times. It could be 3. I'm not sure, but it's the same for all tenants, whether affordable or market rate. They always do a screening to make sure that tenants have enough in income and assets to be able to afford the rent. So that's where those figures come from. But again, much looser screening than the maximum income. So if it's close, we're not going to screen someone out just because they're, $1,000 under, or even maybe $1,500. If it's close, we'll say that's good enough for us. But do keep that in mind. If you're applying for a studio, again, the number is roughly $37,740. If we say, hey, we count it to be about $35,000, that's close enough for us. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be close enough for the leasing office. So you do want to keep that in mind. Just going to take a second to acknowledge as well that it looks like someone else has joined. This is the info session for Bridgewater Viva. My name is David Cashman, SEB Housing. If you have any questions as I kind of move along here, feel free to type them to the right of the screen where you see me, and I'd be happy to stop and answer the question. This information session is for your benefit, so please don't hesitate to type a question out if you have one. Okay, so we've talked about income. We've talked about the maximum income limits being a program requirement. We've talked a little bit about minimum income and assets to make sure that you make enough to afford the rent on the strength of your own money. The minimum income and asset requirement does not apply if you have a voucher. So if you have a Section 8 voucher or anything similar that's mobile that you'll be using, you can ignore everything I said about the minimum income and asset test, because we will not use it to screen your application. Sometimes people wonder, if I end up getting a chance to move forward, could I have a guarantor or a co-signer on the lease, in case my credit isn't so good? Unfortunately not. That is strictly prohibited by the program, so you would not, be allowed to have a parent or someone in that position co-signed for you as a way of strengthening your application. Some people wonder, do I have to be a resident of the town of Bridgewater to apply? No, you do not. Everyone can apply, whether you live in Bridgewater or not. You don't even have to live in the state of Massachusetts. There is a local preference for people who live in Bridgewater for some of the units, but given the number of units, I'm not sure how relevant that local preference will be. We'll talk a little bit more about local preference later, but point is, for now, you do not have to be a resident of the town of Bridgewater to apply for this opportunity. Let's talk a little bit about household size and how that plays out in the lottery. So again, actually probably one of the most important things you could take away from tonight is if you think you're interested, just get an application in by the deadline, which is October 23rd. We'll screen it. We'll work with you to see if you're eligible. It doesn't have to be perfect on the first try. So if there are questions that come up or if there's something that's missing, you'll have an opportunity to address those with us. And submit anything that might be missing or that needs clarification. But if you are eligible, that's great. You'll get a lottery application number from us. That will come in a letter from SEB Housing. It'll list you and anyone else who you put in your application. It'll list the household size that you applied for, what the rent is, when the lottery is, and a number of other relevant details. That lottery number that you get has no bearing on kind of how you move forward in this process. All it is a anonymous identifier to be used in the lottery. So if you, and really it's just where we received your application relative to everyone else who applied. So if you're the first person who got in a 100% complete eligible lottery application to us, you will be A.001. And if you're the second, you'll be A.002. But again, those numbers don't have any bearing or kind of significance in terms of moving forward or, you know, where you're going to be in the lottery. All they mean is here's your anonymous number to be used in the lottery to keep your name private from other people who have applied. And I should also note that when you apply, you can apply for more than one bedroom size. So, you know, you can apply for all four if you want. And really, there's no harm in being over-inclusive. You don't do yourself any disservice. You don't disqualify yourself. There's literally no downside to applying for more unit types, even if you ultimately may not be interested or want to move forward for one of those unit types. So I encourage you, if you think, hey, you know, I really want a 2-bedroom, but maybe I'd be happy in a 3-bedroom or a 1-bedroom, and, you know, apply for all of them because you'll be on all the waiting lists that you're eligible for. And you don't do yourself any disservice by applying for all of them. On the other hand, if you only apply for the 2-bedroom and you don't mark off that you're interested possibly in a 3-bedroom or a 1-bedroom, then later on, if you change your mind and you say, geez, I actually really would want a 3-bedroom, we can't just go ahead and change that, you know, so easily. So definitely much more advantageous to be over-inclusive rather than under-inclusive in the bedroom sizes that you're applying for when you fill out your application. So if you're eligible for the lottery, you'll get that lottery application number that I just talked about, and that'll be the, you know, A.001 or A.002 or whatever it is. The lottery will be on November 4th. It's still going to be virtual, so it'll be just like this. Everyone who is eligible, there'll be 2 drawings. One will be households who qualify for local preference, and then the second drawing will be everyone, including households who qualify for local preference. And it'll be me. I'll be drawing the numbers out of a box and calling them out as I go. Now, everyone who is there will be a bunch of different waiting lists that are established by the lottery. And the waiting lists, what they do is they determine the order that households will get to move forward in moving to the next step. The next step is to apply for a lease with the leasing office. And the criteria that the leasing office uses to see if you're eligible for a lease are different criteria than what we SEB look at to see if you're eligible for a program. So we're looking at some of the things that we've been talking about, like, do you have income that's less than the maximum? Have you shown us what all your assets are? And is any income generated from your assets that doesn't put you over the income limit? And some of the other things that we've spoken of. But we're not looking at things like your landlord references or your credit, or if you have a criminal history or something like that. Those are leasing office questions. Those are totally separate from what we do. So you can kind of think about this as two stages, where the first stage is you're applying for the program, and we, SEB Housing, are looking at your application to see if you're eligible. And step two is seeing if you're eligible for a lease. So you apply for the lottery, you're eligible, you'll get your number, and we'll list every bedroom size that you applied for and that you're eligible for, right? Because you may apply for, several different ones. Maybe you're not eligible for the 3-bedroom because you don't make enough money to support that rent. So you're only eligible for the 1-bedroom and the 2-bedroom. What that means is that when we do the lottery drawing, you will have a position on the 1-bedroom waiting list and on the 2-bedroom waiting list. And there'll be multiple different waiting lists. There will be I don't know how many, but minimum of 4 and possibly as many as 8 or 9. Everyone who's in the lottery, who's eligible, will have a position on a waiting list. So these lotteries are different than what people often think of when they think of lotteries. When people think of lotteries, they oftentimes think of, winners and losers, and somebody, even all the time people ask, what I won the lottery, or, I lost the lottery. Nobody wins the lottery. Nobody loses the lottery. Again, everyone who applies will have a position on a waiting list. Now, it may not be exactly the position you like, but you will have a position. And that position determines the order that you get to move forward to step 2, which is to apply for a lease. Now, if you're interested in how the waiting lists get made up, you can look at page 12 of the information packet, and we literally list out what we think all the different waiting lists will be and how they'll be ordered. Just to give you an example, there will be 4 3-bedroom apartments that have a local preference attached to them. So that means that any households who qualify for local preference will get priority over similarly situated households who don't qualify for local preference. So for that waiting list, a type 3 household who lives in Bridgewater or works in Bridgewater, or has kids attending the Bridgewater schools, those are the local preference categories. Any type 3 local preference household will be in the first tier. They'll have the first priority for a 3-bedroom unit. Any type 3 households who are not local preference will be next, followed by type 2 local preference households, followed by type 2 non-local preference households, followed by type 1 local preference households, and lastly, type 1 non-local preference households. So that's how we have to sort the results according to the different priorities, household types, and local preference. What that means is when I'm actually doing the drawing of the different numbers, you don't know exactly what that means because there is this shuffling that needs to be done later. So let me give an example. Let's say you're a type 1 household and you've applied for 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom units. If you're the first person drawn, that doesn't mean you're going to be first on the 3-bedroom waiting list, because you're type 1, you only need 1 bedroom. You don't need 3 bedrooms. So even if you're the very first person drawn in the lottery, you're not going to be in the top tiers for a 3-bedroom unit. Households that are drawn after you are going to leapfrog after you, leapfrog over you, and be in front of you on the 3-bedroom waiting list. It is generally better to be drawn earlier in the lottery as opposed to later, but it doesn't tell you the whole picture. So when you certainly can and should watch the lottery if you are interested. It's just really important to keep in mind that as I'm drawing the numbers out of the box, you just don't know exactly what that means, because you don't know, the households drawn before you or after you. You don't know what household type they are. You don't know if they have local preference or not. You don't even know what bedroom sizes they've applied for. So, you may say, oh, I was the 5th number drawn, number 5. But no, you can't say that, because maybe you applied for a one bedroom and maybe the four households ahead of you didn't apply for a one bedroom. They only applied for two bedrooms, three bedrooms, and studios. So again, it's generally better to be drawn earlier in the lottery, but you really don't know what it means until I've sorted it. And I'll do that very same night. So, we'll do the lottery at 6, and probably by 9 or 10, I'll send the waiting list. The waiting list is the thing that's going to tell you, okay, here's where, how I can expect to move forward to step 2. So, as often as I say that, there are still always households that say I got drawn first, I'm number 1, I won. It doesn't matter how many times, in the info session or on the night of the lottery, I say, wait till I send you the waiting list. You don't know what this drawing means exactly until I've sorted the results. There's still households who will say, I won the lottery, I was drawn number 1. It's just important for, kind of managing your own expectations to remember that you don't know exactly what the drawing means until I've sent around the waiting list after the lottery. But the good news is you're not going to have to wait for very long, because I'll send them within a few hours of the lottery. And those will be ordered according, it won't be your name, it'll be your lottery number, and you'll just be able to scroll through and you'll say, okay, I know I was eligible for, I applied for the 2 and 3 bedrooms. SEB wrote me the letter that said I was, application number A.001. I know I was eligible for the 2 and 3 bedrooms. So I'm going to go down those lists. I'll find my application number. Oh, I'm number 5 on the 2 bedroom. Great. That means there are 4 households ahead of me. But I know that there are, 10 units or whatever it might be. So I know I'm going to get an opportunity to move on to step 2 for those units. So step 2, again, we SEB aren't really involved in that. That's a leasing office management team part of this process. So if you've gotten up to the lottery and you get on the waiting list, that's great. You've taken a big step. It's not the end of the process, because you do still need to qualify for a lease, which asks, and that qualification involves, a review of things that we're not looking at, which again, could be, your credit, or if you have a criminal history, or landlord references, things of that nature, none of which we SEB are asking about with the program application. If you are lease eligible, great. So if you're program eligible, you're lease eligible, now you've met all the requirements. Now you can go ahead and lease an affordable unit. But the important thing to keep in mind is, if you're, when you're in the lottery, don't, give your current landlord or whatever your current, housing situation is. Really strongly encourage you not to count on being in the lottery as, I'm definitely going to get one of these units and I can kind of count on that and make plans as if I'm moving forward at Viva, because you don't know quite yet. So don't, make sure that you've been found both program eligible by SEB and lease eligible by the management team before you make any definitive plans and, give your current landlord notice or whatever the case may be. I mentioned earlier that one of the nice things in this program is that there's this cushion built in. So you do have to recertify each year. And that part is, probably not ideal. It takes some work, and you have to gather your documentation to submit with your application. The good news is, if you're diligent about it and you keep a file of your, pay stubs and some of the other documents that are required, it shouldn't be too hard. You will have done it before. You will have seen what the documents are that are required, and the second review will not be, should not be as hard as the first one. So if you've gotten through it once, the second time should be easier. But the other good thing is that you can make more money and still be eligible. So just to give you some examples, if you're applying as a new tenant today, as a household size of 1, you can make up to $53,350. Anything over that, Again, that's gross income. Anything over that, you don't meet the eligibility requirements because you make too much money. But let's say you're eligible, you make $50,000, great. And then you lease a unit, you're lease eligible. Well, then 10 months down the road, you get a notice that says, hey, if you're staying in your unit, you need to recertify to make sure that you don't now make way too much money and you haven't kind of earned your way out of eligibility. Well, now you can make up to $74,690. So more tthan $20,000 than you could have made to initially be eligible. So there's this nice cushion built in. So if your own business is doing a little better and you're making more money, or if you're employed by someone else and you're getting a little raise from your boss, you don't need to be concerned necessarily that raise, unless it's a considerable one, is going to make you ineligible for this opportunity. Now, one thing to keep in mind is, we do give an example of what those recertification income limits are in the information packet. Those recertification income limits are based on the current HUD income limits for 2020. Obviously, if you rent a unit through this opportunity and are recertifying a year from now, well, 2021 income limits will have come out. So those numbers that you see in the info pack are for illustrative purposes only, because they're going to change. The income limits are going to change next year. And so the recertification limits, which are based on the income limits, will also change. So, we just won't know exactly what those recertification income limits are until 2021. But this example at least gives you an idea of the type of buffer that's built in. So that's kind of a general outline of the process. Step one, if you're interested and you think you may be eligible, and I would definitely take a look and read through the information packet before applying, so you know what the requirements are and what's expected and how this whole process will go. The most important thing is just get your application in by the deadline, which is October 23rd. And the application really shouldn't be too bad, because this is a no income and asset documentation lottery. And what that means is you fill out, there's a chart in the application that asks you to list your income and your assets, but you don't have to actually produce the documentation that buttresses or demonstrates what you put in there. Now, later on, you'll have to, but really gathering all that documentation is the time-consuming and onerous part of the process, but you don't have to do that now. So really filling out the application should not be overly time-consuming or difficult. You fill out the charts. If you are within the income limits and some of the other requirements, then you'll be eligible. Now, at that point, in addition to getting the lottery letter from us, you'll also get a document. You'll get a guide, basically, and that guide is going to tell you what you will eventually have to produce if you're going to move forward after the lottery, in terms of the income and asset documentation you're going to have to produce. So when you get that guide, you're going to want to start to look through it and start gathering those things. And those are things like your taxes from 2019. So, go get your 1040. If you did it on one of the online TurboTax or something like that, you can just log into your account, download the PDF, save it. Good. You've taken care of one of the requirements for the lottery application. You're going to have to produce W-2s. Hopefully you have that on file. Save it, add it to your file. You'll have another item that's going to be required eventually to move forward. So read through that, begin to collect those documents. But again, the nice thing is you won't have to produce all that stuff until later after the lottery. And at that point, you'll have an idea of where you are on the waiting list and kind of what the reality of this is for you. Is it likely you're going to be able to move forward? And then at that point, you can go through, kind of the more difficult or just not difficult, but time-consuming step of producing the documentation. But just to get into the lottery, you don't have to produce that stuff. It should not be a huge task just to fill out the application. And so just if you're interested, just get it in before that October deadline. And then, take a look at the requirements guide and start to, build yourself a little file. And hopefully then, if you kind of go through each thing that's required and build your file, then after the lottery, if you get invited to move forward to do the full screening, you will already have your file ready, and you just kind of send it into SEB and you're done. So that's it. If there are any questions, I'll kind of wait here for a second to respond. But otherwise, thanks for tuning in. I hope this is helpful to give you a sense of what this opportunity is and what the requirements are. If you have questions about it, you can always call. The best thing to do is to email us, info@sebhousing.com. If you have a specific question, shoot us an email. We'll respond within a day or so. You can also call us, 617-782-6900. Leave a message. We'll get back to you. So if there's something that comes up when you're looking through the materials that you didn't ask tonight, or just comes to mind later, feel free to get in touch. I'll be happy to help you with it. And good luck. This is a great opportunity. These are going to be beautiful units and a beautiful new development at a price that's substantially below what they are on the market. So get that application in, and given that there are 75 units, you've got a excellent chance of moving forward on one of those units. So thanks again, and have a great night. Good night.